You sleep on a soft mattress. You wake up. You walk to a small box on the wall. You press a button, and clean, cold water comes out. Drinkable. Endless. You step into a hot shower, lit by lights that never flicker. You eat strawberries in February. You take a pill that kills an infection that would have killed your great-great-grandfather. Across an average modern day, you use more energy, more medicine, more luxury, and more comfort than any human being on Earth had access to for almost the entire history of our species. But for 99% of human history, this didn't exist. Not for poor people, not for middle-class people, and not for kings. So what did being rich actually look like in the ancient world? What did the most powerful men and women of their time really have? And what did they never get to taste, see, or feel? And here's the question that's going to follow you for days. Are you, right now, richer than a Roman emperor? The answer is more disturbing than you'd think. Let's start with the most famous tomb on the planet. In November 1922, the British archaeologist Howard Carter chipped a small hole into a sealed door in the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. He held up a candle. Behind the door was the tomb of Tutankhamun, a teenage pharaoh who had died around 1323 BC. Inside, Carter and his team eventually uncovered 5,398 objects. A solid gold sarcophagus weighing 110 kilograms. A funeral mask of pure gold weighing 11 kilograms. Chariots, beds inlaid with ivory, walking sticks, fans, sandals, daggers, statues, every piece of furniture covered in gold leaf. It was the single greatest collection of personal wealth ever buried with one human being. And yet Tutankhamun himself, the boy under all of it, had been broken. In 2010, the Egyptian archaeologist Zahi Hawass led an international team that performed CT scans and DNA analysis on the mummy. The results were published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The pharaoh had died at the age of 19. He had a severely broken leg that had become infected. He had malaria. His teeth were rotting. He probably walked with a club foot and used canes for balance, several of which were buried with him. The richest teenager in human history died slowly, in agony, from injuries any modern hospital would have treated overnight. He had the gold, he didn't have the antibiotic. But pharaohs were not the only ones who lived like this. Across the ancient world, being rich often meant something we can barely process today. It meant owning humans. In 1922, the British archaeologist Leonard Woolley began excavating the royal tombs of Ur in modern-day Iraq. Over the next 12 years, he uncovered one of the most extraordinary burials ever found. The grave of a queen named Puabi, dated to around 2500 BC. Puabi had been buried with a headdress of gold leaves and lapis lazuli, hundreds of beads, golden cups, and a lyre inlaid with shell. But she had not been buried alone. Beside her, archaeologists found the bodies of soldiers, ladies-in-waiting, charioteers, and oxen. More than 70 people in total. They had been given small cups containing some kind of drug. They had drunk it, lain down, and died in their places. The richest woman of her age took her court into the afterlife with her. Being rich in 2500 BC didn't just mean owning gold. It meant being able to take living human beings down into the dark with you, and have them lie still while you arranged your skeleton above them. Now let's talk about pure money. In Rome, around the 1st century BC, one man stood far above every other rich person in the empire. Marcus Licinius Crassus. The Roman writer Pliny the Elder estimated his fortune at 200 million sesterces. Historians today have tried to convert that into modern terms. Most place his wealth at somewhere around 20 billion US dollars in today's value. For context, that is roughly the personal fortune of a modern tech billionaire. Crassus had not inherited most of it. He had built it. Through real estate speculation, silver mines, and the slave trade. His most infamous business was a private fire brigade. Crassus owned a team of about 500 trained slaves who would race to the site of a fire in Rome. While the building burned, Crassus himself would approach the panicking owner and offer to buy the property on the spot, at a tiny fraction of its value. If the owner agreed, his slaves would put out the fire, and Crassus owned the rebuilt property. If the owner refused, they would watch it burn down. He built half of Rome this way. And in 53 BC, leading a Roman army across the Syrian desert, Crassus was captured by the Parthians. The Parthians, who hated his greed, did something almost too literary to be true. According to the Roman historian Cassius Dio, they poured molten gold down his throat, telling him to drink the thing he loved. The richest man in the Roman world died swallowing his own gold. The story may be partly legend, but even if it is, the fact that the Romans wanted it to be true tells you everything about how they felt about him. The richest man of his age was so hated that his own people invented his death twice. But here is where it gets fascinating, because even the richest of these people, with all their slaves and gold and lapis lazuli, did not have things you use every single morning without thinking. They did not have ice. Cold drinks in summer, for almost all of human history, were a fantasy. Kings would pay enormous sums for snow to be carried down from distant mountains, sometimes hundreds of miles, in straw-lined boxes, just to chill a single drink. Herod the Great, the Roman client king of Judea, reportedly had ice carried up to his fortress at Masada in the middle of the desert. The cold trade as we know it didn't really exist until the American businessman Frederick Tudor began industrializing ice harvesting in the 19th century. For 3,000 years, every ruler in history sweated through summer like everyone else. They didn't have artificial light either. They had candles, oil lamps, torches. Burning, smoking, expensive, dangerous. Cleopatra famously hosted dinners that burned through fortunes in beeswax just to keep the rooms lit until dawn. The richest people in the world went to bed when the sun went down because no one could afford to fight the darkness all night. And they didn't have fresh fruit out of season. Oranges arrived in Europe in the Middle Ages and were so rare they were given as royal gifts. Strawberries in winter were science fiction. Even an emperor ate what the season gave him. Now here is where it gets darker, because the rich didn't just lack ice and oranges, they lacked medicine. Across the ancient world, the elite died of the same things that killed the poor: infections, dental disease, parasites, childbirth, wounds that turned bad. The Stanford historian Walter Scheidel, who has spent his career studying the demography of the Roman Empire, has shown that even Roman senators rarely lived past their 50s. Most died in their 30s or 40s. The Emperor Marcus Aurelius, perhaps the greatest philosopher to ever rule Rome, died at 58 from what was probably plague. Philip II of Macedon, father of Alexander the Great, was discovered in his tomb with healed bone wounds covering his torso. Louis XIV of France, the Sun King, ruler of one of the wealthiest courts in European history, had so many teeth pulled without anesthesia that the surgeon punched a hole through the roof of his mouth. He lived the rest of his life with food leaking up into his sinus cavity. No amount of gold could buy a clean infection. No king could buy a working antibiotic. For 99% of human history, the body of a rich person rotted at almost the same pace as the body of a slave. It just rotted on better sheets. And this is the moment that should land hardest. You, today, have access to medicine that no pharaoh, no emperor, no king ever had. If you have an infection, you take a pill that, on average, costs less than a coffee. If you need surgery, you are unconscious during it, something not even the richest aristocrats of the 18th century could afford. You drink water out of a tap that has been tested for parasites. You eat fresh fruit in February. You have light at 3 a.m. You have cold drinks in July. You can fly to another continent in a day. You can talk to your mother on a screen. You can listen to a symphony in your headphones, alone in a forest. None of these things existed for the people who once buried their dead with 70 living humans and 100 kilograms of gold. We tell ourselves we are not rich, because someone in a glass tower has more zeros than we do. But the gap between the median modern human and the richest person on Earth today is small compared to the gap between us and the richest people in history. The inequality we worry about now is inside a luxury they could not have imagined. For 300,000 years, your ancestors dreamed about wealth. And even the few who reached the top of it died in pain, in the dark, surrounded by gold that could not save them. Tutankhamun was buried under 100 kilos of gold and died at 19 with a rotting jaw and a broken leg. Puabi went into the earth with 70 people who had chosen to die beside her. Crassus had himself murdered with molten gold by people who hated his greed. Louis XIV ate his soup through a hole in his palate. They had everything that gold could buy in their world. They had almost none of what you have. You drank cold water this morning and didn't even notice. You turned on a light without paying for it in beeswax. You ate something a king would have killed for. They were the richest humans of their time. You are richer than they ever were. You just never realized you were in the race. And somewhere, deep in the part of every modern human that still complains about a Monday morning, the wealth of every ancient king is quietly, invisibly, sitting in the tap, the fridge, the pill bottle, and the light overhead.